On the back page, there's a four-sheet handout you all received. And I certainly don't want to dictate what comes in the discussion period after I speak, but I did want to point out that maybe there are some good discussion points on that sheet as far as practicality, things you can literally start doing if you're not doing them already to get going in your church and to literally see and feel this community of love. And especially down toward the bottom of the page, pastors that smell like sheep. I just want you to think about that for a moment. Leadership that's in with their flock. They know the flock. They interact with them. They know what's going on. They're in their homes. They're in the hospitals. They're where they need to be. But deacons that do the work, deacons that actually serve. I put it here, deacons that deacon. Members that do ministry. Remember, Ephesians 4:11 and 12. The Lord has left us evangelists and pastors to equip the saints for the work of ministry. Remember that? Yep. Members that do the work. They do ministry. Members that don't just sit around in a pew and play church every Sunday. Okay? And at Cornerstone, we have something we call CAST groups. The acronym means coming alongside together. Coming alongside together. CAST groups. And I'll give you an example of what one of these is. We've just started it up again. We have a 12-member group right now of men going through a study on winning against pornography. Highly specialized groups that meet during the week to provide accountability and a biblical focus on how to meet and deal with real problems. Family groups, we have a number of those going. We have women's and men's larger Bible studies that are going on. Service projects, I'm sure you're already doing some of that in your local community. Looking for opportunities to serve your widows and widowers. That's important work, needs not to be neglected. It's snowing today. I mean, I don't think it's going to snow enough to get a plow out or a shovel, but if that driveway needs shoveled, we need to be over there shoveling those driveways for those widows and widowers. Mission trips. Get your people involved, domestic and foreign. It changes lives. And guest follow-up, have an organized guest follow-up program. And evangelistic work, get your people involved in ministry. We have a second minister, that's his whole job, outreach and discipleship. And we have people that are working constantly in our communities and with people that come into our congregation to help them know Jesus. And then, of course, hospital and hospice ministries. These are just some things we're doing back home, and you can talk more about it, but that's what this looks like practically. I want to share with you our story for just a moment. That was some bonus material. It's going to be like, I think it was Gary last night that said that didn't count. I appreciate him plowing that ground for me. Let me share you our story for just a moment where I preach. I've been in Dayton, Cornerstone Church of Christ for 12 years. We were known as Kettering Church of Christ for the first 54 years of our existence. Congregation got started in the mid-'60s out in the suburbs, out in the country really, at the time. A new residential area, church built a modest church building, really suitable for about 150 people. And for its first 40 years, our church kind of hovered around that number, 100 to 150 people. And it was very generous in its mission work. We supported missionaries down in South America. But really, the cold hard truth was our church was relatively unknown in our community. We were known among churches of Christ for our mission work and some of the good things that were going on. But outside in the community among the lost, we were not really known. And probably about 15 or 18 years ago, that changed. Got a newer, younger leadership. Simultaneously, the congregation saw an influx of younger families with kids, and I moved there in 2010, and the congregation was already kind of an upward trend when I got there, and within the next year, we were basically had outgrown our building. We We had to remodel everything. We had to expand our seating inside. And really, for a short time, that helped our problem. But really, what we began to experience throughout the last decade were waves of growth and then subtraction. Families would come, they would go, we'd reach capacity, we'd deal with parking issues, then we'd go through a period of subtraction where the numbers would go down. We'd come right up against what we call the 200 ceiling. We just could not break it. We could not get over it. And then we go back down in the 140s and 150s. And this, we went through this 2 or 3 times over the last decade or so. And about 6 or 7 years ago, we hired a second minister who specialized in local outreach and evangelism. And he stayed with us for a couple years. He got real sick and had to move. And so by 2020, we hired another second minister. And this is about the time we're on another upward cycle of growth. And then the pandemic hit. Let me tell you about the Sunday before the pandemic. March the 8th, 2020. We had 208 people in our very small church building. And I remember getting up before the service began and asking people, scrunch up everybody, get real close, get to know everybody, it's going to be great, you know. I hope you all had a good shower before you came to church today, because we had no more room. Had no more room. People are parking out on the grass in Ohio in March, in the mud. Parking out on the grass because we had nowhere else to go. And we had to do something. And this is where God went to work. By His providence, we were able to find a new building 5 minutes from our old place in a highly visible location. We were able to secure a loan. We arranged for the sellers to buy our old building, and we moved in 5 months later after completing upgrades and renovations, all within 5 months in the middle of a pandemic. And by His providence and work, when we moved in, we came back much larger and stronger. We did not lose one family during the pandemic, not one. Between January of 20 and January of 22, we have added 21 new families to our church, and that's all by God's power. People call me, what are you guys doing? It's 1,000 little things. It's 1,000 little things. It's not one thing. It's not one person. It's not one group of elders or deacons or ministers. It's everybody working together. Now, we have embraced technology. We've made a significant financial investment. We have a top-notch AV team. We have a live stream audience that has been in the tens of thousands every week, every month. I don't know how we got that. God. I mean, we've spent $600 on Facebook ads. It's all word of mouth. I've never in my life seen anything. I don't know how to explain it. But people around the country, people across the globe are watching our live stream. During last year, we had 30 to 50 people from the Dayton community in our building every Sunday from a 30-mile radius. Last spring, we had 2 families join us. When I went up to introduce myself, they stopped me in mid-sentence and said, I know who you are. We've been watching you for a year. Okay, and they've joined up with us now. This year, our visitor numbers are down a little bit. We're still around 30 people every week in the building that are from the community. We've just completed a new transition to another outside outreach minister, and we really are starting to feel the momentum building again. We have a guest follow-up team that's incredible. People are making those guests feel welcome and loved. And a lot of it is driving, I think, is our live stream. But more than that, I think what keeps bringing people back is the family atmosphere of love, care, and concern. And I think our family at Cornerstone has demonstrated that pretty effectively. Now, I didn't come here to brag about that. I want to show you some biblical principles for the next few moments that I think are the basis behind it. One is the passage we looked at a moment ago in John 13, 34, 35, but I also want to take you to Acts chapter 4 and verse 32. And for the next 14 minutes, we're going to look specifically at Acts 4, 32 through 35. when I sat down and began to think about how am I going to presenting 2 lessons on creating a loving church community, I thought first we've got to look at Jesus. How did he love? And second, we've got to look at what did the first Christians do? How did they love? And you can read through the book of Acts and see glimpses of what made them so effective. Obviously, Jesus is the one we follow, but the great example of these first Christians should not be ignored because they put it in action. And we need to put these same principles into action if we're going to be successful today. So here's verse 32, Acts 4. The entire group of those who believed were all of one heart and mind. And no one claimed that any of his possessions was his own. But instead, they held everything in common. Now, I think there's a distinguishing mark of the early church here. It's right here in verse 32. I want you to see how united they are. In fact, the Holy Spirit describes it here as being of one heart and one mind. And so as we think about the strength and life of the local church, I want you to see its dependence on unity. And by the way, we don't create unity. It's been given to us by our Savior. We maintain it. Ephesians 4. We govern it. We keep it going. We sustain it. But these are people who are of one heart and one mind. And I want you to see their dependence on that unity. A preaching friend of mine that lives in Florida now says, quote, "The smallest church with godly unity is a powerhouse, while the largest church without unity is a dying church and ready to bust apart." So what does it mean when we look here at Acts 4:32 to be of one heart and one mind? And what does all of this have to do with being and creating a community of care? Well, I'll tell you, being of one heart and one mind is not just practicing the same doctrines. And by the way, if you think we can all just practice the same doctrines inside our churches, you've missed it, because I'll tell you what, unity is not uniformity. All right? I know that from my own congregation. We have people there that are from all different backgrounds within the churches of Christ. And by the way, we got lots of different Church of Christ people. Okay? We got some that are really conservative and some that are really more on the left. And our family represents about all corners of that. And I guarantee you, if you were here, and I don't know your family here at Alliance Christian Center, but I guarantee you got people all over the map. All right? Because that's how it is. And so when we look at this, unity is not always just the absence of conflict. And peace is always the product of some other thing. Listen, you know, a church could be at peace because it's dead. A church could be at peace because it's apathetic or indifferent. And by the way, a dead body is always at peace. Or it could be that it is a peace that has been given to each of us by the Spirit, that is ruling our hearts, that is bringing us together with one heart and one mind, and that makes us alive, and it brings us to unity where we move forward as one heart and one mind. So how do we do that? Well, one of the ways that we do this is understanding that we are all part of something bigger than ourselves. So, verse 32, they are of one heart and one mind. Now, what those key words are heart and mind. What's he talking about there? Well, it's the very center of my life and being. It's where my thoughts and emotions are. It's where my actions are being driven. And so what you see in the early churches, rather than having 3,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 individual hearts guiding them, the Jerusalem church is moved by one heart and one mind. They all realize they're a part of something that is bigger than themselves. Brothers, I want you to know and understand the church is not your club. It is not something that we become part of if it fits us or if it benefits us or if it, adds to my individual life and goals. The church is different from a club. It's not just a bunch of individuals that we get along with to associate with because we all have common interests. The church is a body. It is a whole that is bigger than the individuals within it. I'm not saying individuals are unimportant, but we need to understand it is a body. Romans chapter 12, verses 4 and 5 is a passage that we should give consideration to for just a moment. If you'd like to turn over there, let me flip back to this here. Romans 12, 4 and 5. I'll just reference it here because of time. Paul says there we are individually members of one another. Individually members of one another. So the point here is my individual life, although it is important, it is swallowed up into the greater whole where I am part of a body that moves with one heart and one soul. So again, we need to understand we are part of something bigger than ourselves. If I'm going to build a community of care, I need to understand that the benefit of the body is placed ahead of the benefit of the members. The benefit of the body is placed ahead of the benefit of the members. So, for example, look again at verse 32. Look at the second part of the verse. No one claimed that any of his possessions was his own, but instead they held everything in common. So, if there were needs, individual members sold their possessions to care for other members. And by the way, they're not under any obligation to sell those things. They are doing this by the genuineness of their hearts. All their actions are voluntary. But why do it? Why sacrifice? Well, the benefit of the body was of greater importance than the property to that individual. And so really, this is what being of one heart and one mind should look like inside of a unified congregation. Look, our togetherness is not just to avoid infighting and opposition. It is not just about teaching the same thing. It means I am part of the body and I'm putting the needs of the body ahead of my own individual needs. Let me give you a very practical example of this. Look over at Philippians chapter 1 for just a moment. Philippians 1:21. And we're going to look at verse 21 and then down in 24. And I'm just going to reference these high points. If I were really preaching a longer sermon today, we would camp out here for a few minutes. But I want you to see verse 21. What individually would Paul have rather done? For to me, to live or to die is what? Gain. He says, I would rather, if it was up to me, I would rather just go home and be with the Father. He says, it's not up to me. Look down verse 24. It is better that I what? Remain. Where's Paul's primary concern? It's not on him. It's not about what he wants. His primary concern is about the body. And so the question is how often do I feel this way about my own local church family? It's not all about me. Listen, for years and years, 25, 30 years now of being in the church and being in leadership, I have heard people, I'm really looking for a church. How's this church going to help me? I mean, I've had people just come in all the time, this church really is not giving me what I want. I'm going to go look somewhere else. And especially when I was working out in the Dakotas in a very small church, it was so discouraging because I'm like, stay here and bring something to help us. I'm going to leave here because this place doesn't have that many kids. Well, if you'd keep your kids here, we'd have kids. Brothers and sisters, we live in a selfish society. So the question really is, am I going to overcome that? What can I do to serve the body? What resources do I have? What talents and abilities do I have that I can bring and serve inside the body? Listen, Philippians 2, 5 through 8, Jesus put himself, subjugated himself to the needs of the body. He put the church before himself. Read those verses 5 through 8, Philippians 2. So, again, we need to understand that the benefit of the body is placed ahead of the benefit of the members. Here's another thing. The goals of the individual are subordinated to the goals of the body. So, If we're moving with one collective heart, my individual life has got to be swallowed up by the life of the body, then that means my individual goals change. My personal goals are subjugated to that of the need of the body. Look at verse 34, Acts 4. All of them had individual goals for their lands or houses. There's a reason why they had bought those properties to start with. But now that they're in the body and members of the body have needs, all their personal goals changed because the needs of the greater body became more important. Now again, let me throw out a disclaimer here. This does not mean that our individual life is unimportant. We have to provide for our family. We have to prepare for the future. All of those things are there. We have social and recreational pursuits and hobbies. You don't have to quit your job and go out on a mission trip. You don't have to give up all your educational pursuits or career goals. But our individual goals do need to be subjugated to the body. Listen, when we come to Jesus, our individual pursuits have new meaning. They find new purpose. I've known brothers that have gone into industry, and because of their relationship with Christ, they've been able to funnel profits and funds from their industry into mission trips and work that helps build and strengthen Christians. Our individual pursuits take on new meaning. Your job, your possession, your talents are viewed all inside of being in the prism of the body. In other words, how can I use my blessings? How can I use my resources to build up and help with the growth of the body? That is the most important thing. So, again, we need to understand the goals of the individual are subordinated to the goals of the body. And you know what this led to was their unity in the early church overshadowed their diversity. Now, first Christians, they came from everywhere. Look at Acts 2, 9 through 11. All the people that were on the day of Pentecost, they're from all over the known world. Acts 6, you have the Hellenists who are from all over, different cultures, different languages. All of this is in the early church. Big diversity out of every background you can imagine, and yet it is Paul writing in Colossians 3:11 that says they all function together as one. You know what? They didn't see nationality. They didn't see skin color. They didn't see language differences or gender or social class. They didn't care about where they went to college. They didn't care about their political party. They didn't care about their educational level or their career status. They just saw Jesus. And as a result, they were all of one heart and one soul. And I'll tell you what can Jesus still do? Look at your local church family. I'm sure there are several different local church bodies represented here today. I look at one back home. Jesus is bringing us all together. I preach for a congregation that we have those that are black and white. We have people from Italy. We have people from South America in our congregation. We have Republicans. We have Democrats. We have Ohio State people. We have Michigan people. We have Big Ten people. We have SEC people. SEC range, by the way, never mind. Anyway, and look, we are of one heart and one soul. And you know, the idea here is, it doesn't matter if you're Big Ten. I can still see Jesus in you. It doesn't matter. Look, it shouldn't. If you're a Democrat, I can still see Jesus in you. Look, we got to quit being the church of Fox News. Okay? I watch Fox News, but that needs to go out the window when I'm around my brethren. I know I've gone to Medlin. You know, I quit preaching and gone to Medlin. You ever heard that? We said it down south. But, brothers, we got to get that out. We got to see Jesus in each other. Not all our superficial differences. And finally, verse 33, they validated the apostles' testimony. When you look at verse 33, Acts 4, the one heart and one mind that they possessed is really what sold their teaching. That's what made the difference. That's what the world saw. And I want to close with reading a passage, and give me just a second to pull this up, because I think it's important that we focus on the words of Jesus. Because if we're going to create this community of love and care, I want you to look at John 17:20 for a moment. I pray not only for these, but also for these who believe in me through their word. May they all be one as you, Father, are in me and I am in you. May they also be one in us. Why? So that the world may believe that you sent me. The one heart and one mind of the early church is what made their testimony powerful. And so in the next few moments, as you look back here on this back page, or you go home later today and you consider what I wrote here on the back page, you think about your local church and how we can implement this in our own family, remember the purpose. The purpose is not so we can have fun. Look, our church has so much fun together. I laugh and carry on with some people. We are so close, a lot of us. But it's not about that. That's a byproduct. Because the purpose is about bringing glory to Jesus, and so that the world may believe that God sent him to save us. Thank you.